Here are 8 Lightroom editing tips and tricks for better autumn images. So let's begin. The very first thing I do before I start with anything else, go into the basic tab and we want to adjust the profile to our needs. That means for autumn scenes, I generally want to push the autumn foliage. So click on the profile drop-down menu. A perfect profile for that need is the Adobe Landscape profile, which will boost the base saturation of the image. You can already see it. And with the profile set up, we can continue with the basic adjustments, adjusting white balance, contrast, and so on. But of course, there are many more profiles to choose from. Again, click on the profile drop-down menu. This time, let's click on the browse feature. Let's say you want to get a little more creative with the autumn foliage in your images. Therefore, expand the artistic panel right here. And then let's go with the artistic free profile. Right away, all those warmer color tones have shifted more towards an orange color range. Now what we can do is to bring up the amount, and this will make these tones more intense, and as you can see, we get more creative effects this way. However, if you want to keep it more natural, tone down the amount. Let's go with something around 60. Once this is done, you can see the colors are lacking a little bit of saturation, but that doesn't matter. Click on Close to get back to the basic panel. Then what we want to do is we can bring up the vibrance and the saturation to reintroduce colors. Now the colors still might look a bit strange, but we can use the white balance sliders and fine tune them to our needs. You can see this way we can get some really crazy autumn colors, even if they are not there yet in the raw image itself. Tip number 2, create dreamy images by reducing contrast. For images where we do have some heavy sunlight, what I like to do is to add some dreamy look, almost like an autumn glow effect. And we can achieve that by reducing the overall contrast. So what this means for this image in particular is we can dial down the highlights all the way, and at the same time we're going to bring up the shadows. Doing this will reduce the overall contrast of the image, and this makes everything look a lot softer. We can push this further by opening up the black. So bring up the slider right here, and you can see as we push the black slider, the image gets softer and softer, and it kind of appears to be glowing. That's exactly what we want. But we're not done yet. What we can do as well is to use clarity and dehaze to make the glow effect stronger. So instead of increasing clarity, we're going to drop it. And this will make everything softer. And the same goes for dehaze. Bring it down slightly and create this dreamy glowing effect. Just keep in mind, as we bring down the dehaze, this will also make the image brighter, so be aware of clipping in the highlights. To make this dreamy effect a little more convincing, we can also use masks to add a little bit of sidelight coming in from one of the sides of the image. For that, go into the masking menu. I'm going to grab a new radial gradient. Let's make it nice and big. I'm going to align this radial gradient with the shadows, so we can kind of find the light's direction pointing down towards our subject like this. Now what I'm going to do is to increase the exposure. And I'm also going to increase the blacks, so the right side of the image where the light is coming in appears to be a little more glowing this way, using this radial gradient. On the other hand, we can also use contrast to make foliage pop, or maybe make the tree branches themselves stand out, because like in this example, the tree itself has a very interesting texture and I want to make it more visible. So for this scene, I would start by bringing up the base exposure, making everything brighter. Then I'm going to start to bring back contrast by dialing down the shadows. This will affect the tree itself without affecting the autumn foliage. This way we are making it stand out, and we are creating a very visible subject this way. Of course, when we adjust the shadows and blacks like that, always pay close attention to the histogram. Right now you can see there's a little bit of clipping already in the darkest parts. I don't think it's a big deal. We could try pushing the blacks a little further down, giving this image some more contrast, and you can see right at this point at the bottom of the tree, clipping in the darkest areas is starting to kick in. So I wouldn't go further than this. To further push contrast, we can also use highlights and whites. That means I could bring up the whites slider, which will make the foliage of this tree brighter, and we are creating this super strong contrasty scene this way. Looks much better. For tip number 4, we are going to target foliage colors with masks to specifically adjust them. Like in this case, let's say we want to change the leaves of this tree. Go into the masking menu and we're going to create a new mask and we are going to choose a color range mask. With the color range eyedropper, I'm going to click somewhere in the bright yellow parts of this tree. Right away you can see not much is selected, but we can use the refine slider, bring it up, and instantly we are selecting pretty much all these leaves. If you still want to select a little bit more, you can hold down the shift key and create another point by clicking right in here yet again. And just like that we have a perfect selection. Of course we also have the floor level selected because there are green and yellow tones in here, so we need to subtract this area from this mask. Click on subtract, choose a linear gradient, and I'm going to just roughly deselect the foreground. Now we have created a perfect mask for the leaves, which we can now tweak to our liking. I can bring up the temperature, making these yellow tones in the tree more intense. Maybe also bring up the tint, giving them a hint of orange. And let's bring up the saturation, maybe even the exposure a bit. Just like that. Perfect. If you're struggling targeting the leaves with the color range mask, for tip number 5, we can also make use of Lightroom's new landscape mask. Keep in mind, this doesn't work perfectly all the time, but you can give it a try. For that, go into the masking menu, click on create new mask, and here choose select landscape. Lightroom will give you a bunch of different options from which you can select. In this case, I'm trying to target the vegetation, and you can see it's not perfect, but it can be helpful in certain cases. So let's select it like this, click on create mask. I am going to further modify this mask by clicking on it. I want to subtract a brush. I want to get rid of the left side right here. And I also want to kind of get rid of the background because I just want to select the brighter trees in the foreground. So something like that. And with this mask, what I can do, for example, is to bring up the exposure, adding a little more brightness and glow to these vibrant trees in the foreground, enhancing the autumn foliage this way. Another way with which we can make these autumn tones pop is with color contrast. For that we want to work with the two different colors on the opposite sides of the color wheel. So we have these warmer tones right here in the foreground, and we do have colder tones in the sky. The thing is, in the sky is kind of a little bit too bright and the blue tones are barely visible at the moment. So what I'm going to do is to use another color range mask. I'm going to click somewhere in the blue part of the sky. I kind of want to select all the blue tones of the image like this, and what I'm going to do is to bring down the exposure. This will give the blue tones more saturation, and it will also help with the overall color contrast of the scene. What I can do as well is to bring down the white balance temperature within this mask, making the blue tones even bluer. You can also bring up the saturation if you want to really push the color contrast. What I like to do for scenes like this is to use multiple differently sized color range masks. That means I'm going to use another color range mask for the upper right corner right here. Then I'm going to subtract a linear gradient, taking out everything except for the very top part. And in here I'm going to further bring down the exposure, which will create this really nice looking gradient from bright to dark in the sky. And again, this just enhances the whole color contrast of the scene with the warm tones of the landscape against the cold tones of the sky. Beautiful. For tip number 7, if you want to make the autumn colors pop, you don't necessarily have to use vibrance and saturation because these two sliders will boost all colors of the image the same. So we do get more vibrant foliage right here in the foreground, but the background will also get more saturated. You can see we have some really ugly blue tones right now in the background, so that's not the way to go for this image. Let's reset that. Instead, what you want to do, go down into the color mixer, and here we can target the saturation specifically for each of these color tones. So to target the autumn foliage, we're going to bring up the orange tones, the yellow tones, maybe even the green tones if you want to boost the foreground as a whole. And then I want a desaturated background, and since there are mostly blue tones in it, I'm going to bring down the blue saturation. And this creates a really nice balance without oversaturating everything. Another benefit of the color mixer is we can not only adjust the saturation of each of these color tones, but also the hue and luminance, which can come in handy. Let me show you. I'm going to work on the hue now. I want to bring in some more colors to those trees. I'm going to take the orange hue and I'm going to drop it down into the red color range. You will see the top of these trees now have these red tones in them, which I think looks really cool. I can also bring down the yellow hue just a bit, introducing some more orange to the autumn foliage. Just like that. Beautiful. I can even bring down the green tones just to balance the greens of the foreground, introducing more yellow to them. Perfect. Now what about the luminance? With the luminance we can control the brightness of these color tones. That means if I bring up the orange luminance, the orange tones in those trees will become brighter. Same goes for the yellow. If we bring it up, the yellow parts of the image will become brighter. I can also use that to darken the background. And since the background is made up of blue tones, all I need to do is use the blue luminance slider and bring it down to make the background darker. And finally, for tip number 8, let's go all the way down into the calibration tab, which is really helpful if you want to push the colors a little more and maybe even get a little more creative creating new colors for your image. Because what I usually do for my shots is to work with the blue primary hue and saturation, bringing down the hue. You will see how this will shift all these warmer tones more into the red color range. And this is a little bit confusing since we are changing the blue primary hue and it's affecting the warmer color tones. That's because these sliders all work a little bit differently than the color mixer from previously. To give you a brief example, when I shift the blue primary hue, it will not only affect the blue color tones, but also the colors on the opposite side of the color wheel, which are these orange yellowish color tones right here. That's why these are changing as well. I find it a little bit hard to remember, so what I do usually is to play around with these sliders until I get something that looks kind of cool. I also like to push the saturation here, which gives me some really nice effects. And that's it for the 8 Lightroom editing tips and tricks for your autumn images. Let me know which one you like the most, or feel free to share your own tips and tricks down below in the comments. I would really appreciate that. Thank you very much for watching and see you all next time.